電車で GO!
Densha de GO is an arcade train sim series that has been running since 1996. While largely unseen outside of Japan, the earliest incarnations were incredibly popular and sparked a minor phenomenon in arcades and on home consoles. The boom lasted until the early 2000s, and the series was set to end with Densha de GO Final on the PlayStation 2. Things didn't exactly work out that way, and that's something I'll be covering in a later video. In this series, I'll be going over each major installment and some of the hardware and ephemera tied to the franchise. I'll save the arcade and development stories for a bigger series retrospective coming later. For the meantime, this episode will cover the beginning with 1997's Densha de GO on the Sony PlayStation. Densha de GO entered Japanese homes on the 18th of December 1997. Having developed an enthusiastic fanbase in arcades, the game sold well, very well, over 1 million copies, and triggered a bit of a train driving boom in Japan. In an interview with Game Center CX, the game's main producer Akira Taito describes how he was looking for something to go in an arcade alongside, but distinct to, the ever popular fighting and racing games. A combination of his love for trains and a chance encounter with a train sim at the now demolished Tokyo Transport Museum were the impetus for his hit series. Development of the arcade Densha de GO started in 1995. It was showcased in 1996 at an arcade expo in Tokyo before getting a wider release in early 97. The cab proved to be a surprise hit. Its realistic control method and working dials captivated arcade goers. Roadshows in Tokyo and Osaka saw enthusiasts play the game alongside professional train drivers. Naturally, all the excitement and hype surrounding the arcade release of Densha de GO all but guaranteed a home version. A port was put into production, and the runaway success of Sony's PlayStation made it the ideal home. Development was handled internally at Taito's development center, with Chief Director Togakushi Noriyasu running the show. The game was to be a direct copy of the arcade, featuring the same 4 lines and rolling stock. Development went well, and excitement for the port within the company was high. The game released to a ravenous public, catching Taito by surprise. Alongside the game, a bespoke controller was released that mimicked the control system of the arcade. Such was the demand for the game and matching peripheral that the controller soon ran out of stock. In an attempt to meet demand, additional shipments from the factories in Taiwan were ordered. One of these ships, laden with the eagerly awaited stock, appeared to get lost at sea, increasing panic at Taito headquarters. Turns out it was hiding by an island during a particularly wild storm. The game features 4 train lines, chosen due to their familiarity with rail fans. The Sanin Main Line, a rural line running along the west coast from Yamaguchi to Kyoto, was included due to the director's experiences growing up. Akira Saito, who is from Kyoto before moving to Tokyo to pursue a career in video games at Taito, relied on his knowledge of the track to accelerate the game's development. The other lines are incredibly well known to Japanese rail fans. The Keihin Tohoku line runs from Omiya all the way down to Yokohama, connecting north to south Saitama, Tokyo, and Kanagawa prefectures. The Tokaido Main Line connects Tokyo to major port city Kobe and runs parallel to the Tokaido Shinkansen Line, which in turn connects Tokyo to Nagoya, Kyoto, and Osaka. The Yamanote Line is probably the most famous train line in the world. It's a loop around central Tokyo that hits all the tourist hotspots: Shinjuku, Ueno, Shibuya, Akihabara, Shinagawa, and Tokyo Station. It connects to several large terminals, allowing travel to anywhere else in the country. Its pea green livery is known throughout Japan and is regularly featured in the Densha de GO series. The featured trains were all based on the contemporary rolling stock and authentically modelled. Clockwise from top left there is the Kiha 58 series on the Sanin Main Line, the 209 series on the Keihin Tohoku Line, the 221 series on the Tokaido Main Line, and the 205 series on the Yamanote Line. The diesel-powered Kiha 58 series was by far the oldest train in the game, and by 1997 had already been in service for 35 years. This series was finally retired in 2008, but is still in use on some private rail lines. The 209 series, which ran on the Keihin Tohoku line, was still pretty new at release. They had been in production since 1993. This train was electric, designed to ferry commuters to and from Tokyo and surrounding prefectures. These trains are still in use on some JR lines, having been refurbished to more modern specifications. Another series that is still in use today is the 221 series, again also having had a refurb. They were designed as commuter trains for the suburbs of the Kansai region. They are the most distinct of the 4 trains featured in this game. These days, the 205 series has since been relegated to less important lines, but in 1997 it ran one of the busiest train routes in the world. If you've ever seen one of those videos where station attendants are pushing commuters onto a packed train, that was probably at a station on the Yamanote line. First and foremost, this is an arcade game, and those arcade sensibilities have been brought directly to the home version. The timetable is punishing and absolute accuracy is demanded, or it's a rapid game over. Mistakes absolutely tank your waiting time. Densha de GO is equivalent to a life gauge, and once you've made a mistake, you're almost guaranteed to fail later on in your journey. It's definitely designed to keep you pumping in the coins. Densha de GO is played from the train's perspective. There are no alternative camera angles to include the cab or external cameras as featured in later games. The user interface is wonderfully basic. Target and actual times, a waiting time, throttle, brake gauge, speedo, distance to your stopping point, and details on the train in use and section of the route. You have your master controller for an accelerator and the brake lever for deceleration. On a gamepad, these are operated with up and down and square and X, or you can use the bespoke 2-handle controller for added authenticity. The graphics engine does a surprisingly good job of recreating the arcade hardware. The arcade Densha de GO was not built around the latest iteration of the boards being used in other 3D games, and were a bit sluggish for such an ambitious game. But both the arcade and home conversion do an incredible job of recreating the routes. One thing you'll notice is the absence of music. The title screen is silent, as is the main menu. Only the train select, credits and tutorial stage have music, and after that it's just train engines, announcements and the horn filling your ears. Alongside the game, there are a collection of train photos and cinematics from the game, some of which are unlockable. This would become a staple in later games with photos, music, cinematics and 3D models of trains placed inside a virtual train museum, often locked away behind no credit runs. There's also a demo for Taito's Side by Side, a racing game that used similar hardware to the Densha de GO series. Being the first in the series, the game is very simple. You could say bare bones. There are only 4 routes, 4 trains, and you can't mix and match trains with routes. The arcade version featured hidden tracks activated by having the control levers in set positions when pressing start. These additional tracks were strangely absent from the home conversion. Your ultimate goal is to finish each run using only the 1 credit. For the Sanin line, this is fairly easy as it's the introductory beginner stage and has the fewest number of stops. It also features a very brief guide to playing the game that is unfairly simplified. There's also a tutorial stage that essentially boils down to accelerate, cruise, stop at the station. This is the same as explaining brain surgery as pop off the top of the skull, have a swish around, and sew that bugger back on. Densha de GO is all about control, tiny changes to your speed, subtle deceleration, managing inertia. If you follow the tutorial, you will fail consistently. Despite it being a glorified time trial, racing to the goal will only get you punished. If you're too early to a station, the next leg will feature a penalty forcing you to drop your speed for an elongated period, absolutely guaranteeing you a game over. There are also weather changes too. Going too fast? Ahead of schedule? This torrential downpour will put an end to that. You'll have to brake a lot earlier and drive slower to manage driving in the rain effectively. Again, there's a good chance this will give you a game over. If you think this is too punitive, just wait for the sequel, Densha de GO 2, the Dark Souls of train games. It is possible to recover lost waiting time by performing your stops well and arriving to the schedule. Also, tapping the horn on the approach to tunnels and railroad crossings can net you an extra 2 seconds each. There's also a bonus stage that is triggered on the harder missions where you connect 2 trains together. Do it without smashing them together, and you can win a hefty lump of waiting time. Pop quiz. What is the speed limit on the Yamanote line? What is the suggested running speed between Yoyogi and Shinjuku stations? You don't know? Join the club. There's no mention in the manual at all. Approach speeds, stopping distances, cruising speeds are all for you to work out, either by buying one of the dozens of guidebooks available at the time, brute forcing it through trial and error, or standing behind the driver's cab taking notes on how it's done in real life. It's an extraordinarily bold way to sell a game, analogous to selling Microsoft Flight Sim with the instructions joystick forward to move plane down, joystick back to move plane up. Oh, and then berating you for not landing perfectly at Heathrow in 100-mile-an-hour winds with an engine missing. God, I love this series. So what is good about it? Why did this sell so many copies? What was the appeal? Rail fans and otaku are not numerous enough to generate the level of sales Densha de GO garnered. So who was buying this game? It cannot be overstated that trains are the mode of transport in Japan, and tapping into that shared experience, a world familiar to everyone from preschoolers to salarymen to housewives to retirees, is immensely powerful. Trains are ubiquitous, driving one is inaccessible, but here's your chance. Here's your chance to drive the train on the route you take to work every day, the route that takes you to school, the route that you rode on your holiday, your trip to Tokyo Disneyland, your trip to Kyoto. It appealed to the whole family. Kids like trains, as they like tractors, fire engines, large machinery. Parents like the idea of going behind the scenes, playing the routes of their daily commutes, playing the route to see the buildings they go past every day. Being a train driver in Japan is also a pretty prestigious position. Not everyone who wants to be one gets the chance. There's a lengthy process to becoming a train driver where you start as a station attendant and work your way up over several years. But here's your chance to jump straight in. Wish fulfillment for all those wannabe train drivers. It's not the best in the series, it's far from the worst. Seeing as how the series progressed, it's more of a testbed for what would come later on. Now it serves as a pretty good introduction to the series for newcomers. Where would Densha de GO go on a tier list? Well, I reckon it's a solid B. There's limited content, but it's an excellent attempt at recreating the arcade experience in the home. Well, that'll just about do us for this video. Do you agree with the tier placement? Let me know in the comments below. I will see you in the next video where I'll be discussing Densha de GO X on the Sega Saturn. See you then.